Today, we are diving deep into a fungus that has, let's be honest, a pretty wild reputation. You're starting to see it everywhere, right? From fancy coffee blends to high-performance supplements. We are talking, of course, about cordyceps.
So, how in the world does something nicknamed the zombie fungus, and for good reason, it literally takes over the minds of insects, become one of the hottest wellness ingredients on the market? It's a bizarre journey, and that's exactly what we're going to unpack today by looking at the hard scientific evidence. First things first, we need to get one thing straight. Not all cordyceps are the same, not even close. So we're going to start by tracing its path from this incredibly rare high-altitude fungus to the global commodity it is today. And this right here, this is probably the single biggest point of confusion. There are really two main players in the cordyceps game. On one side, you have Ophiocordyceps sinensis. This is the OG, the wild caterpillar fungus from the Himalayas that's insanely rare and costs a fortune. Then, on the other side, you have Cordyceps militaris. This is the one that can be grown in a lab, which makes it accessible. It's the version you'll find in almost every supplement, and more importantly, it's the one used in most modern scientific studies.
And this didn't just happen overnight. Cordyceps was first written about way back in the 15th century in Tibetan medical texts, where it was described as a tonic for the lungs and kidneys. But it really wasn't until the mid-20th century that scientists figured out how to isolate and grow its mycelium, which led to these standardized extracts that made widespread research and its current popularity even possible. So what's the big deal? What is it about this fungus that has researchers so fired up? Well, to figure that out, we've got to look at what's going on at the molecular level.
The magic of cordyceps, or at least its potential, is thought to come from this whole cocktail of active compounds. You're looking at the main players right here. Things like adenosine, special sugars called polysaccharides, also known as beta-glucans, and sterols. But there's one compound that really gets most of the attention. And that compound is cordycepin. It is the absolute star of the show, especially in that cultivated C. militaris. Now, it's what's called a nucleoside derivative, which basically means its structure looks a whole lot like the building blocks of our own DNA. And that unique structure is precisely why scientists are so interested in it for a whole range of effects, from calming inflammation to helping modulate the immune system. Okay, so animal studies and petri dishes are one thing, but what happens when you actually give cordyceps to people? Let's get to the heart of it and look at what the human evidence really says. We're going to start with the claim that has the most buzz and, frankly, the most weight behind it. Athletic performance. Can this fungus actually help you push harder or last longer?
The data here is surprisingly consistent. A recent meta-analysis, which is basically a study of studies that pools all the best research together, found that cordyceps can lead to modest but statistically significant improvements. We're talking about things like a better VO2 max, which is just a fancy term for how well your body uses oxygen, and an increased time to exhaustion. The typical doses in these studies were between 1 and 4 grams a day. But here's the really interesting part. The effects seem to be most obvious not in elite athletes, but in older adults or people who are less trained to begin with.
So the bottom line here is this. The science suggests that for a lot of people, cordyceps may actually help improve aerobic performance and help you fight off fatigue during a workout. All right, let's move on to the next area. This one has a surprising amount of research, and it connects right back to its traditional use as a tonic. We're talking about kidney health. Okay, this is so important. Multiple meta-analyses have found that when specific, standardized cordyceps products are given with conventional treatments for chronic kidney disease, patients often show improvements in key markers of kidney function. Now, I cannot stress this enough. In every single one of these studies, it was used as a complementary or adjunct therapy. It was never, ever used as a standalone replacement for medical care.
And look, this quote from a scientific overview sums it up perfectly. The best evidence we have right now supports cordyceps as a complementary tool, something you add on to help support kidney function, and always under medical supervision.
Okay, so beyond endurance and kidney support, there's another area that's getting a lot of attention: the immune system. Could cordyceps actually help keep us healthy? The human trials here are what we call promising. Some studies have found it can boost the activity of our natural killer cells. You can think of those as the frontline security guards of our immune system. One trial even saw a trend towards people getting fewer colds. So the early signs are good, but pretty much all researchers agree we need bigger, longer trials to really know for sure. Now, before anyone gets too excited and rushes out to buy a supplement, we have to hit the pause button and talk about the reality check. What are the risks
And what do you seriously need to look out for?
This is absolutely critical to understand. The research is crystal clear that the biggest safety concern comes from that original wild-harvested caterpillar fungus, Ophiocordyceps sinensis.
Because it grows in the wild, it can act like a sponge, soaking up heavy metals from the soil. And I'm not kidding, studies have found that some wild samples contain potentially dangerous levels of arsenic, lead, and cadmium. This is a huge risk with unregulated wild products.
So if you are considering a supplement, here are the key quality markers to look for on the label. 1. Make sure the exact species is listed, like C. militaris. 2. Look for a standardized extract, like the CS4 that's used in a lot of the studies. And 3, and this is maybe the most important, demand proof of third-party testing for heavy metals.
And finally, cordyceps just isn't for everyone. Because it can mess with the immune system, blood sugar, and blood pressure, it could potentially interact with medications for those conditions. The bottom line, as always, is to talk to your doctor before you start any new supplement, period.
All right, let's pull all of this together. Let's look at the final evidence-based scorecard for cordyceps. So here it is, the final breakdown. For exercise performance, the evidence is modest, and it seems to work best for certain groups of people. For kidney health, the evidence is moderate, but, and this is the big but, only as an add-on therapy. For immune function, it's promising, but we really need more data. And for other areas like mood, the evidence is still very, very early.
You know, the story of cordyceps is a really fascinating case study. It shows what happens when an ancient tonic gets put under the microscope of modern science, revealing both some real potential and some very real risks. It kind of leaves you with a final thought, right? As we keep testing these ancient remedies, you have to wonder, which piece of folklore will be the next one to make that leap into the modern, evidence-based pharmacy?